Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Number to call, 888-589-8840 if you want to join the conversation, 888-589-8840. Yesterday there was a special election in Florida, which is enormously significant for 2014 fall elections, enormously significant. This was a special election. Bill Young, who had represented this district, a longtime Republican, so it was a seat that was in Republican hands. He died, and it created a vacancy. So a special election was held to replace him, and the race was between a Democrat with a lot of money, with a lot of name ID. Her name was Alex Sink. Sounds like a guy's name, but it's a girl, probably short for Alexander or something like that. So Alex Sink, she ran against Rick Scott for governor in 2010. She only lost by 1 percentage point. She got 2.3 million votes. This election for Congress was in a district that President Obama carried in 2008 and again in 2012. She outspent the Republican, a guy by the name of David Jolly, who was apparently a pretty bland performer. I didn't see any of his speeches or campaign appearances, but very little in the way of magnetism or charisma, very little name ID. He was a lobbyist in Bill Young's office, worked for Bill Young as an aide, but that meant he was just a virtually invisible guy for all this time. So he was a no-name candidate, had very little money to spend, not a good fundraiser, not a good campaigner, and the Republican won last night. And he won last night for one reason and one reason only. He hung Obamacare around the neck of his Democratic opponent like an anvil, and it took her down. She could not bear up electorally under the weight of Obamacare. His whole campaign was to tie her to the Democratic Party and tie the Democratic Party to Obamacare. And it worked. That was basically his only campaign message. She lamely tried to defend herself, couldn't do it, and went down to a flaming defeat. Now, this has enormous implications for 2014. And I tell you every day, look, we are fighting a winnable war. And looking at the results of this race, I'm just going to look at three pieces, then we'll quickly go to the phones. Obama's approval rating, by the way, down to all-time lows, 41%, according to the Wall Street Journal and NBC News. And I've gone over with you some of those, I guess formula is too strong a word, but some of those models that predict election results. And when the president's rating drops below 50% in a midterm, in an off-year election like we have in 2014, the party that he represents loses seats, anywhere from 6 to 12. And the more his numbers drop, you get down to the 41, 42% level. I mean, this thing is looking like an absolute bloodbath for the Democrats, and there will be one reason and one reason only, Obama and Obamacare. Now, to give you an idea of the importance of this race in Florida, this is a liberal observer by the name of Stuart Rothenberg, and he wrote this back on January 9. It's rare in politics that anything other than a presidential contest is viewed as a must-win, but the special election in Florida's 13th district falls into that category for Democrats. A loss in the competitive March 11 contest would almost certainly be regarded by dispassionate observers as a sign that President Barack Obama could constitute an albatross around the neck of his party's nominees in November. And I would say albatross is way too weak an analogy, just more like an anvil around their neck. And so this guy's saying January 9, this is must win. Democrats got to have this. If they don't get this, this is fatal. This is lethal for their chances in November. Here's a piece on Newsmax featuring the observations of two pollsters, a guy by the name of Doug Schoen and Larry Sabato from the University of Virginia. And they're both saying that after this, what this election means last night is that the GOP is very likely to take over the Senate in November. So this is, Alex Sink. She's one of the biggest Democratic names in Florida politics. She lost to a first-time candidate who was underfunded, had no name ID, no name recognition, no visibility in the state. There was a libertarian that drew about almost 5% of the vote. Most of those votes would have come from the Republican. And, both sides said, look, this David Jolly is a lackluster candidate. He doesn't bring any fire to the issue. So the fact that you would have a Democratic candidate with all those advantages get waxed. I mean, she got waxed by this guy. If you factor in the libertarian vote, it's even worse. I mean, it's a 2-point victory, which isn't a landslide or anything like that. But when you look at what the obstacles that the Republican candidate had to overcome, this is a really spooky thing. Doug Schoen, this guy was a pollster for Bill Clinton, so he leans left in his politics. This election represents a repudiation of the Democrats and Obama. In fact, when she was running for governor in 2010, she carried this district against the Republican gubernatorial candidate, Rick Scott, who won the overall election. But in this district, she won it against the Republican in 2010. This time, 2014, she loses it to a no-name Republican. Doug Schoen says the Senate is now probably better than 50-50 to go Republican. The Democrats are in a position that is increasingly becoming weaker and weaker as the days go by. In other words, Schoen saying, look, it's even going to be worse. You think it's bad now. You wait till November. Really going to be bad. Dr. Larry Sabato, director of the University of Virginia Center for Politics, told Newsmax Democrats, quote, are deeply disappointed by this loss, and they should be. Josh Krashower, writing for National Journal, which leans left in their political orientation, his piece today is entitled, Why a Republican Wave in 2014 is Looking More Likely Now. Just a couple of excerpts, then we'll go to the phones. Tuesday night's special election in Florida should be a serious scare for Democrats who worry, and this is a leftist writing this now, a serious scare for Democrats who worry that Obamacare will be a major burden for their party in 2014. Despite recruiting favored candidate Alex Sink, outspending Republicans, and utilizing turnout tools to help motivate reliable voters, Democrats still lost to Republican lobbyist David Jolly, and it wasn't particularly close. And he says, look, people on both sides considering this a bellwether contest, and so overall a very, very bad sign for the Democrats. And one of the questions that was being raised in this debate is Alex Sink, the Democrat, her message was, let's keep ObamaCare. Her message was, don't repeal it, fix it. In other words, don't end it, mend it. We know there's problems. This was her message. We know there are problems with Obamacare. Let's keep the thing. It's got a lot of good stuff in it. Let's keep it, and let's mend it. Let's patch it. Let's see if we can repair and make this thing better. And so the question was, can a message like that win? And the answer is no. I mean, the answer to me is very clearly a no, and it reveals what Josh Krashower says is an early sign of the depth of anger over Obamacare. And the only hope that the Democrats have is high turnout in November midterms, but he says core Democratic groups usually show up in lower numbers in off-year elections also. So, again, obviously we're not counting our chickens, but if you're looking for a reason to be encouraged, ladies and gentlemen. The last chapter in Obamacare has not been written. I got a column I'll get to second hour where I talk about this. Let's go to the phones. Let's grab a call from Seth in Lafayette. Seth, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, how's it going? I had called yesterday and didn't get a chance to completely discuss anything, but one thing I want to talk about was today you had talked about the realm of science and Christianity in the same sense.
Yeah, uh-huh.
And a few months ago, maybe a month ago, you had talked about evolution and how, to me, even if evolution exists, what does that disprove? It's just an example of how amazing our Creator is. I'm not saying that I don't believe that we came from like apes or anything of that nature, but I believe in adaptary evolution, which is like, say, some buzzard in the desert learned how to grip cactuses better to better eat some bug it loves. That I believe in. But, like, to me, evolution, just look at it, stand in awe of what our Creator is possible of. Anything is possible, Brian.
Well, and I understand what you're saying. So I would take it. You would be. Would you classify yourself as a believer in theistic evolution, that life developed according to the evolutionary model? It's just that God was directing it at every step.
Oh yeah, I mean, yes, that's definitely believable to me. I mean, there's no reason.
Well, and see the
I
reason,
believe one.
see the reason, Seth, that I've got a problem with theistic evolution. I understand what you're saying, and I understand why Christians want to adopt that view, because it's a way of sort of making a concession to the evolutionary dogma, and yet maintaining the presence of God in the mix. But I am not a believer in theistic evolution, Seth, because I think evolution is just bad science. I mean, you might be able to say it's good theology because we're keeping God in the mix. We're saying that God directed every step, but it's just bad science. And I'll tell you why, Seth. No scientist has ever observed evolution that is one species turning into another species, which is what you have to have.
It's like you said. It's still the bird. In Darwin's study, he used what bird was it constantly, consistently. Like you said, no matter what, it's still that bird. Yeah, it may have changed the color.
Yeah, well, Darwin's finches. This is supposed to be evidence for evolution. Well, they were finches when he started looking at them, and they were finches when he finished. There was no evolution there whatsoever. There was a kind of adaptation you were talking about, and that's a part of the DNA that finches had. I mean, that wasn't anything new. There was no new information, no new DNA. And so that's why I don't believe in theistic evolution, Seth. I understand what you're saying. I appreciate, and I understand why Christians want to take that view, but I just think theistic evolution is bad science. Nobody's ever observed evolution taking place from one species to another. All of the increasingly complex life forms appeared suddenly, fully formed in the fossil record. That's evidence for special creation. Theistic evolution violates everything we know about genetics. Like begets like, just as the Bible said. Anyway, Seth, appreciate the call. Out of time. Let's take a break for the news. We'll be right back. Stay with us.